Thanks to the ease of accessibility, almost every new TV show nowadays is being watched by someone, somewhere. And even if a great show largely slips under the radar, there'll always be a small but very vocal minority that gives it that little bit of extra attention after everything is said and done. With films, on the other hand, there's such a vast pool of titles that even for those way more involved in the community, it's a lot easier to pick up this random hidden gem that you've never heard anyone talking about before. So, with that in mind, I scoured not only every major movie site on the internet, but the deepest recesses of my brain to choose 5 movies that I believe deserve to be seen by you, my wonderful audience. Some of these you might have already heard of, and some of these you may have had no idea existed. For the former, that's fantastic, it means you have impeccable taste. For the latter, however, unacceptable condition! Unacceptable! I'm kidding, of course. I thought it would be fun to try something a little quirky like this in the waiting period between big releases, and as an excuse to keep pushing back that Ava video I keep talking about that I know will take me like 2 months to make. It's coming eventually, guys, I swear. So, with that intro well and truly wrapped, let's jump right into it. It's always fulfilling and satisfying to see characters you know and like from comics or books brought to life and adapted faithfully, and 2012's DREDD delivers that to an almost self-gratifying amount. I've always had a craving for dystopian science fiction as it nicely balances out with my usual genre tastes of high fantasy. Just like every other adult white guy these days now that I think about it. I was here first, damn it. But this craving is especially satisfied when you couple this setting with morally dubious characters and an egregious amount of hyperviolence. DREDD follows the average Monday in the life of Judge Dredd, played by the ever-wonderful Karl Urban, entering into a decrepit tower block in order to assess a new recruit. Judges are the only form of law and order in Mega City 1 and make up the judge, jury, and executioner trifecta, effectively allowing them to kill you for breaking any law they seem fit to punish. And the citizens are apparently totally cool with this system. And you thought Batman was harsh for beating you within an inch of your life for forgetting your turn signal. This system culminates in a society that plays by its own rules, where anarchy reigns supreme, with law and order barely keeping itself together. People's day-to-day lives are ruled by whichever means they can find to survive or the gangs they pledge themselves to for protection, with the gangs sitting at the top of everything reaping the benefits of the wealth and violence they can cause, and forcing those beneath them to become smugglers, manufacturers, or even torturers. You know, all those drug trafficking shenanigans you get up to with the boys. This is where our main lead comes in. As you no doubt have guessed if you've heard of this character before, what makes this film so fun is watching DREDD single-handedly turn an entire criminal hierarchy into the inside of a smoothie blender, effortlessly beating down on criminals that outnumber him 100 to 1 with seemingly no issue. It's his ability to assess a situation and formulate a strategy, combined with his extensive training, that makes the one-man army so satisfying to watch, using a mix of military strategy and technical prowess to gain the upper hand in any scenario. It has a very similar appeal to movies like The Raid and John Wick, but what sets it apart is our main man. He's both ruthless, but also somewhat sympathetic, initially coming across as the blank and brutal face of the law, tasked with a simple evaluation of a failing recruit, but over time, you get to see glimpses of the man underneath when they both become trapped in a high-rise full of criminals out to kill them. You slowly come to realize that his attitude was molded by the world around him just as much as the criminals he's taking down, and this fantastic performance was given without Karl Urban ever taking the mask off.
Law is not the law. I am the law.
That's how you make a DREDD movie, Stallone.
I am the law.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It's one of those movies that's such an easy watch when you don't want to think too hard and simply enjoy some gritty slow-mo violence, but you'll find yourself more and more engrossed in it as the film goes on, just to see how brutal the next kill is and just what their plan might be to escape. With the inhabitants of the Peachtree's apartment complex having a wide mix of personalities from the chaotic to the downright crazy, just waiting for the day when a judge kicks down the door to dispense justice. All this and not even mentioning the soundtrack, which is just as dark and gritty as Mega City 1 itself. Having said all this, it's one of those movies that you would ordinarily pass over in your local HMV store if you didn't know anything about it, but even so, it's definitely worth a watch and you'll have a great time from beginning to end. In the film industry, directors are constantly striving to make a name for themselves and stand out in any way that they can, to be the next Nolan, Tarantino, or Edgar Wright. However, they're so busy trying to model themselves after those that came before that we rarely get the chance to see what they can do when given their own complete creative freedom. So before going on to create standout films like Chappie and Elysium came District 9, Neil Blomkamp's directorial debut, which shows us what would happen if aliens became unintentional immigrants on Earth, the possible ramifications of this, and how we as a collective society would react to them. Would we treat them with reverence as the first sentient species we've met from beyond the stars? Would we praise them for their superior intelligence in mastering space travel? Would we fuck? Slap them all in a slum, give them some basic rights, and call it a day. We did it, guys, we saved the city. Why do I feel like this is an allegory for something? The main plot of the film takes place 1 year after the aliens have already settled. Wickes van der Meer is an MNU spokesperson and now a lead in this story, promoted to the position by his father-in-law and tasked with the relocation of all the aliens. Now dubbed prawns from their home in central Johannesburg called District 9 to a new facility built outside the city called District 10. Really killing it with the name creativity here, guys. Whilst conducting the relocation, he's accidentally sprayed in the face by a mysterious liquid that a group of prawns were hiding. While intended to be rocket fuel for them to return home, the liquid has the unfortunate side effect of altering Wickes' DNA into that of a prawn, and he begins a messy and painful transformation over the course of the film into one of the creatures. The reason why this film is so good is because of the addictive and brutal nature of the story. Wickes isn't helping the prawns out of the kindness in his heart, he's purely doing it for selfish reasons as they promise to cure him. Equally, the prawns who promised this to him are using him as leverage, as he's a human with connections and influence so that they might complete their plan. And the government in charge of everything care for neither, seeing the prawns as disgusting creatures only worthy of experimentation, and Wickes as another office grunt until his transformation, after which they see him as a means of replicating prawn technology and ushering in scientific advancement, even if it causes him immense pain and ultimately his life. If you're a fan of grounded and gritty science fiction, this will probably be right up your alley, as aside from the CGI, which is held up incredibly well to this day in my opinion, Blomkamp manages to bring over his signature style of post-apocalyptic but stylized cityscapes, which really shines not only in his action scenes, but the softer heart-to-heart moments as well. And hey, there's just something almost surreal about watching a character go through not only a physical, but psychological change that really tickles that character development part of my brain. The style and nuances in District 9 will take some getting used to, but for those of you that stick through to the end, you'll find an absolute treasure of a film. Let's be honest here. When you've made more money than you'll ever need in your life by starring as the one kid with glasses that everyone and their grandmother knows, you become free to do whatever the hell you want whenever you feel like doing it. In the case of Daniel Radcliffe, that freedom would result in a whole bunch of indie films that you can tell he wanted to be in out of pure interest rather than any monetary value. And one of those films happens to be Guns Akimbo. Now, even if the title of the film doesn't ring any bells, you all know of this movie from that one image that circulated the internet a few years back of Daniel looking like he'd just finished a 3-day coke binge wielding 2 new ones he'd found in the bin out back. The magic of a film like Guns Akimbo is that it takes itself 100% seriously and you're dragged along for the ride whether you like it or not. Miles Harris is your typical mild-mannered Reddit user, meaning he gets a kick out of trolling people in online forums and potentially getting banned for saying racial slurs. One day he picks a fight with the forum users for Schism, an underground death game where criminals and psychos compete in live-streamed death matches with audience members betting on who will win. This one interaction will forever cause his whole life to change when Richter, the kingpin of Schism, breaks into his house, drugs him, and forcibly enters him into the game, bolting a pair of pistols to his hands in the worst case of DIY I've ever seen since that pink sauce trend. As if his life suddenly wasn't spicy enough, Miles is immediately pitted against Nyx, one of Schism's deadliest players who has been offered the chance of freedom for the games, and her only objective is to have him dead within the next 24 hours. And thus Miles is thrust into the very world that he only recently mocked, with camera drones recording his every move and underground guards ensuring he never strays too far from the game area. Through this journey, our lead has to confront himself about if he's willing to do anything in order to survive or if he'll just keep running away from his problems all his life. You end up seeing what someone who's lived a boring and mundane life could end up like if they were suddenly put into a high-octane situation like this, and it's incredibly entertaining. Learning how Schism is infiltrating everywhere in our society, watching nutjobs and psychopaths murder each other in increasingly graphic ways, and how truly hard it is to put pants on when you don't have the use of functioning hands. There's almost never a period of downtime throughout the whole runtime, with high-octane fights and constantly increasing stakes, and it pays off for this film so well. When your entire premise is a guy getting guns stapled to his hands, you'd think the gag would wear off extremely quickly. But between all the action and the fast-paced runtime of the film, you're sat getting hyped up for the final confrontation to see what happens. It was such a close tie between this and Swiss Army Man, and while I definitely recommend checking that one out when you've got the time, this one is just so much more batshit insane and you're gonna love it. We live in a time when technology is completely integrated into almost every part of modern society. As optimistic or terrifying as that sounds, our world is at the mercy of the lights staying on, lives are broadcast for all to see through so many filters it's hard to distinguish if it's even reality anymore, and snarky opinions about your favourite movie can be shared for all to see. Follow me on Twitter at NEVRYYD. From this abundance in technology and the automating of every aspect of our lives, it's no wonder that the transhumanism genre has seen such a boon. Upgrade follows the story of Grey Trace, an auto mechanic whose life is turned upside down after his wife is murdered and he's left paralysed from the neck down. After a failed attempt to end his own life, he's visited by Eron, whose name bears no resemblance to anyone currently living, and offers to give him STEM, a chip that can help manage a human's motor functions, giving him the ability to walk again. The twist is, however, STEM is an AI, can talk, and has the power to take full control over Grey's body if he asks it to, resulting in all of his motor functions and brain capacity to work at a superhuman level. And if that didn't already sound shady enough, Eron has Grey sign a non-disclosure agreement requiring him to pretend to still be paralysed. Upon returning home, STEM identifies one of the people involved in the night of his wife's murder, and the two of them set out for revenge. The premise is your standard inhuman AI interacting with human nature, but it's how brutal the film is at showcasing how little this machine thinks about human life that will make you rethink how you talk to Siri from now on. The setup and concept for this film is so incredibly strong that what actually happens can seem both somewhat repetitive and predictable, meaning the second half of this film will hit differently for each of you, with some of you being all for it and others turned off, which is a strange thing to say for a movie this pacey and action-packed. It honestly plays like a video game movie at times, where Grey has to use all of the skills at his disposal to defeat a series of baddies one after the other before the plot and twists kick in. Still, for fans of films like The Guest, The Purge, and The Matrix who all enjoy a healthy dose of techno-fear, this film is excellent fun, and its world is perfectly suited for future short films or sequels following different characters and stories, which is the hallmark of good world building in my opinion. It doesn't linger too much on grandiose themes throughout its runtime, instead letting you focus on how a man driven solely by revenge is allowing this machine to take more and more control away from him, providing an almost satirical take on society today. Every time he kills one of the men involved, he finds more information and clues leading back to the events of that night. With STEM urging him on, it becomes a back and forth of if he should continue his path of revenge, or if he should just appreciate having his life given back to him. And it really makes you think how people in a scenario like this would behave. Should we allow our anger to control us when we lose everything? Are we pushing technology too far? Where do we draw the line between science fiction and reality? How much do we really know people when viewed through a lens or a screen? Or how do we feel about letting an artificial intelligence take away our bodily autonomy whenever it feels like it? It's a fascinating watch because for all of us who keep up to date with social media and the advancing technology around us, there's always that underlying fear that technology similar to this has already been invented. It's just not quite to the level where we should be scared of it yet, which is why I'm finally coming forward and saying that I'm an advocate for Neuralink. What do you mean it fried the brains of all the chimpanzees it was tested on? That's just poppycock, mate. I will say that there are some points in the movie where you'll feel like it's getting bogged down, but it was definitely a fun ride for what the film was, and an easy recommendation for those that like lower budget flicks, which I assume will be most of you because you're still kicking around this channel of all places. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check it out, and hit the subscribe button while you're at it. Okay, so if you've made it this far into the list, this last one might come as a bit of a surprise, especially compared to the darker and grittier stuff I've been talking about so far. The Secret of Kells is a film I had never heard of until a few years ago, when a camp counselor I was working with during my time in America recommended that I watch it. I've always been one for animated work, so obviously I said sure. Why not? The film is honestly a beautifully observed animated feature that manages to be both charming and macabre. Quick history lesson for you all. The Book of Kells is an illuminated manuscript gospel book written in Latin, containing the 4 Gospels of the New Testament together with various prefatory texts and tables. It is considered to be both the finest works of medieval Irish illumination and the best known symbol of the Irish illuminated manuscript tradition. The book takes its name from the Abbey of Kells, where it resided for centuries, which just so happens to be the location of our film right now. The story, set in the 9th century, revolves around Brendan, a 10-year-old novice at the Abbey in Kells. He's curious and creative with a talent for drawing, spending most of his time hanging out with the monks in the monastery's scriptorium. His dour uncle, the abbot, would much rather have him focus his attention on the monastery's major project, firming up the walls to protect the people who live there from an expected attack by the Vikings. Utterly convinced that the strength of their walls will reflect the strength of their faith, One day, brother Aiden, accompanied by his cat Panga Barn, arrive at KELLS with news that the Vikings have destroyed the monastery at Iona. Aiden is a renowned illuminator and has managed to save the famous Book of Iona, which he believes has the power to turn darkness into light. Upon seeing Brendan's interest in the book, he gives him the assignment of finding berries to make ink. Since the abbot has forbidden him from going into the forest, he and Panga must go in secret. Before long, they are lost and under attack from mysterious creatures, but a fairy named Aisling rescues them and shows Brendan how much there truly is to see of the world's beauty. The artwork and creativity on show here is honestly stunning, with Brendan and Aisling interacting and weaving amongst environments taken from the Gospels themselves, climbing trees made of swirling emerald ink, and through forests made from the letters of the book. It's no surprise to see why this film was nominated for an Oscar back when it released. It also mixes Christianity and paganism together in such a way that anyone, regardless of their beliefs or background, will find themselves entranced by the film. I'm not religious in any way myself, but the story and history this film showcases gives me a newfound appreciation for those that find strength in a higher power. Any potential stumbles the film has are all ultimately forgiven because, let's face it, this film is beautiful to look at, and the characters are well crafted, and that's no mere overstatement. From the very first minute of the film's opening right up until the end of the credits, the craftsmanship and creativity are paramount throughout, with the characters endearing themselves to you from the very moment you meet them. The story is aimed directly at children, however, so if you find it a little too simple for your tastes, that might be why. So if you haven't done so already, you owe yourself to at least give this movie a try, because you might find yourself surprised at just how much you love it. And that's everything I wanted to mention in this one video. If any one of these sounds like something you'd be interested in or want to check out, you can find a few of them on YouTube Movies for a fairly cheap price, or on some streaming service or other. I don't know, there's like 50 of them now. Except KELLS, which you'll have to find a DVD of. Thanks. Big thanks to all of you that made it this far into the video. Don't forget to subscribe if you like the content, and share this video with your grandma so she can widen her cinematic horizons. And with that said and done, I'll see you all next time.